Hello and welcome to DY's surprise special draw set recommendations and also summer surprise special scam ticket builder scam thing. I don't know the proper name for it, but yeah, I'll put those two things in this one video today. So if you're looking for any recommendations on who to choose here or who to put in your scam, this one here, this is the video for you. So there's a lot of things to go over today, so we'll get right into it. But before I start, I do want to point out that for both promotional items, wait for free draws before buying them or before using it, because you might get what you want from free pulls. So always wait for those as long as you can before purchasing these items and using them. All right, so as always, I will use this particular tier list sort of thing just to categorize things and talk about them. So this time I will go over everything new that has been added since the last Suptix, and since this Suptix has pretty much everything available at the moment except the Commander of Destructions, I will go over some of the older units as well that I think are worth mentioning. So beginning on the April 15th banner, we have Cherine. Cherine is a very strong low button burst character at the moment because her S3 provides herself with 100% TA, 50% Echo, and Flurry, which is very good for short burst rotations. This is very comparable to something like Song, the Eternals S1, which is 20% Echo and 3-hit Flurry. So from a purely numbers standpoint, Cherine's is actually better. The only difference here is that Songs can be copied, which is going to be relevant for a character we'll talk about later. So Cherine is has that sort of use case. Next, we have Mars. So Mars is mostly an offensive full auto character at the moment. I'm not sure if she'll be used in Guild Ball because she doesn't provide much defensive utility in the case of like things like Dispel or Healing, but for anything permanently available at the moment like Fadil or Osiris, she's a very, very solid attacker to have in those cases. Next, we have Lavirita. Lavirita himself wasn't really used in this recent Guild War. There was some theory crafting with this S3, but I didn't really see it come to fruition. However, if you're an Agni player, his weapon Goldbeak was something that was definitely used, and it's something you can maybe consider if you're a very highly invested Agni player. If you're a Magna player, I would not really consider Lavirita at all. Moving on, next we have the May 15th banner, which introduced Tikoh. Tikoh has currently been used in Augustia full autos. They are very high investment from what I know of, but yeah, he has that use case, so that's really, really cool. I'm not sure if he'll have the same usage in something like Guild Ball, but it's something to at least consider. Next, we have Cagliostro and Clarisse. This unit has been used currently in Siegfried full auto and things like M3 full autos where you need a bunch of dispels. And the fact that they have this dispel synergy with other units that dispel is really nice because there's Wind has a lot of characters that dispel. So that's like Galleon, Halloween Lich, Esteriola, and the newly added Cassius, who is on the current banner as well. So character that's very, very good for those sorts of full auto situations, and I can definitely see them being in part of some Guild Ball lineups in the future. And then finally we have Hauhet added on June 16th. This character I would sort of classify similarly with Mars in that she is useful for mostly permanently available content, and I think she's a solid unit overall. However, I do not know if, and she wasn't used in the most recent Guild War. She doesn't have too much defensive utility in that regard, but maybe as some budget sort of like burst setups, you can use her S2 and then sacrifice her off or something like that. But yeah, I think regardless, I think she's still a solid unit, but mostly maybe for permanently available content. All right, so since Dark was coming up, I'll talk about some Dark units next. First one I will mention is Bowman. This character is very, very powerful, all for the cost of 0 buttons. You'll pretty much use him everywhere, or you'll see him in a lot of different lineups, except for charge attack teams. And it's all because he provides a bunch of skill damage on normal attacks, a bunch of skill damage on special attacks, and he just guaranteed triples and punches the foe down. So for any sort of short burst rotation, you'll be probably seeing Bowman there. On a similar note, we have Tyra. Tyra was used last Guild War for her third skill here, Rage of Tyranno. This particular skill gives her triple attack, flurry, and most importantly, it means that her damage skills activate twice. And this includes her auto-activated skill from this, which is when a foe uses a special attack, activate her S1. And this is significant because it removes one buff. It's a dispel. And with this particular buff, it means it activates twice, which is very useful for Guild War Full Autos when the bosses are putting up a bunch of buffs, and also for burst rotations, because this particular skill is very nice for burst, and being able to dispel in burst is also very, very powerful. So Tyra is my second pick for the Dark ticket. Next, we have Tsukuyomi. Tsukuyomi is a more defensively oriented character. She has been used in some HL solos. I'm not sure if she'll have the same prevalence in Guild War. However, if you want to be sort of tanky, maybe it's something you can consider, especially if you like charge attack lineups. Another sort of defensive character is Tikoh here. Tikoh is mainly used for his ability to readily provide substitute all, and also he provides his healing skill semi-regularly, all because they reset on the enemy's special attack. He doesn't really provide anything else like dispels or things like that, but he's still an option if you want to have sort of a tanking character, I guess. And then the next three characters, I'll talk about them sort of together, which is Manamel, Lucius, and Aletheia. These are all skill damage oriented full auto characters. In Guild War context, this is nice because it means that you'll be doing a lot of damage per turn, which means that you won't be taking many turns, which means the boss has less opportunities to hurt you, basically. Lucius in particular can also dispel here on his S1, and this activates twice with his Ogi buff. I don't think it's up often enough to be super duper impactful, but it is still a nice bonus to have. Manamel and Aletheia respectively can provide things like debuffs and some mitigation, so it's something to consider. For budget options, I think they're definitely something to consider if your dark options are lacking, because the other really good options are all seasonal or limited and hard to get. All right, let's circle back around to fire. And we'll start with Ragazzo. This character is very, very strong. He's only alive for 2 turns, but during those 2 turns, he does a bunch of damage, and when he leaves the fight, he can activate evokers like Frau, or even characters that just want to be there later in the fight. Sometimes things like Percy, or maybe even something like Icarus, our next character. Although Icarus is sort of a more budget option for his ability. Like when switching to a main ally, he gets 5 crests, and that lets him click this skill. This is something fun you can do. I don't personally use it that much, but as a budget sort of attacker, I do think it's nice. It's a nice pairing with Ragazzo. However, if you're an Agni player, I think his weapon is something that is very noteworthy. Dreadful Flamesword has currently been used in a lot of different places in Agni, just because it provides HP for a character like Wamdus. So yeah, it's something to consider there. So yeah. Next, actually, speaking about HP, I forgot to mention, we have our Soul Invoker and Tetragod summons. So these are newly introduced Belial summons, basically. They are strictly better than Belial if you are above 80% HP, because they provide 50,000 supplemental as opposed to 30,000. These are mostly relevant, I think, if you are focused on manual burst setups. If you're a full auto gamer or something, I think Belial will get you by fine. One thing to note about Soul Invoker is the synergy with Christmas Wamdus. Wamdus has a hard requirement of 60,000 HP, Christmas Wamdus. If you have 60,000 HP, you activate Innocence Fairy at the start of the fight, which is very, very important. With Belial, Belial cuts your HP, which means it's harder to reach this 60,000 number. Soul Invoker, however, does not. So not only does Soul Invoker provide more supplemental damage for the insane amount of hits Wamdus does, she also makes it easier on your grid to reach 60,000 HP. So in Fire in particular, Soul Invoker is very powerful. Tetragod, there's no character like Wamdus in Water. However, Tetragod has a very high synergy with Hrsvelga setups because it does so many hits. So if you're a Hrsvelga player, it's something you should definitely consider. Speaking of Hrsvelga, we have our first Water recommendation from me, Erika. If you plan to get Hrsvelga, or you already have Hrsvelga and don't have Erika, she's definitely someone to consider, especially with a character like Ilsa, which came out recently as well. Another gun character to help activate Ilsa, and yeah, very, very good Hrsvelga support. And then on a similar note, we also have Gwynne. Gwynne is, from what I've seen, mostly used in full auto with Ilsa at the moment, with her Svelga MC, just because she has the gun proficiency, so it activates Ilsa. In the past, she has been used for some budget burst options as well, and if you don't have her Svelga, I still think she is an okay unit. I do think I would consider some of the other options here first, but yeah, either way, worth mentioning. And then finally, we have Zeta. Zeta is a very glass cannon character. She's mainly used for her ability to provide echo to the entire team with this particular skill here. On triple attack, she provides 10% echo. However, even if you are using her outside of a zero button context, in more budget friendly burst setups, you can click her skills and she has her own self-assassin and things like that. So glass cannon character, but overall very highly offensive. Next, Earth. We have Olivia, probably the best character available on the Suptix overall. Olivia is used in pretty much everywhere but OTK. In full auto, she is good. In HL, she is good. Very, very good character for Guild War as well, because she provides terror on her first skill, which is this particular debuff, where the foe can't use special attacks. Very, very good character. Oh, I forgot to mention one more water character, by the way, which is Cupitan. I think Cupitan is a decent water full auto character, sort of like these three here in dark. She provides a bunch of skill damage, and she also has some sustain as well. Some dispels here, healing, 2-turn cutter debuff. The only caveat here is that the effects from this are random, because you get random ones whenever you use a charge attack or buff skill. So when you get these might be random, but for longer full autos, I definitely do think that she's very fun to use, and for a budget option, I think she's great. All right, moving back to Earth. I'll mention these two characters together, which is Sabrina and Pengy. Both are used in very short Guild War burst oriented rotations, things like NM90 or EX+. Sabrina herself has also been used in Grand Order blue chesting setups. But yeah, if you're invested in Dirt and you want to have those low button, like short quick burst rotations, both these characters are used for the fact that they triple attack and they do skill damage after those triple attacks. Okay, next, let's move on to Wind. First up, we have Mirin. Mirin is currently used everywhere in charge attack teams, and the charge attack teams for Wind are all used in HL, which is Far-Zero and Hexa. If you're doing things like that, or like sub-H or solo, Mirin is very, very, very good. And it's mainly because she provides this insane buff to the team just by being in the team. She also does a huge amount of hits. From here, 8 hits, and it activates when the foe uses special attack. And then she also does Floral Slice, which is her S2 on Ogi. Very, very, very good character. And she provides charge back in. Character is very synergistic with the current Wind HL core. Next, we have Noire. So Noire is similar to like Mars in that she's sort of a permanently available offensive character, but I do think she has some Guild War usage as well, because like Olivia, she has this terror debuff on her S1. I think in Guild War, we might see her for some of the lower difficulty nightmares in some of the faster rotations, just to lock out what the boss does for a couple turns and then kill them during that time. And maybe in some high investment setups with like Ronfire, maybe she'll be used as well for terror once again. So something to consider. And then if you're a Zephyrus player, she has her weapon on top of that, which is the new sort of like Destiny Knuckles. If you're below, I think 60% HP, I think this weapon's better. I forget the exact math, but yeah, this weapon's very, very good. Next, we have two characters here, which is Friday and Enyo. Both characters are mainly for skill-oriented, like Dispel teams. So we talked about some Dispel characters earlier with Cagliostro and Clarisse. Friday, on Thursdays and Fridays, she's basically on the level of a seasonal character, because her S1 here activates. It has 14 hits, removes 2 buffs from all foes. Guild War, if it lines up, it's nice, but even outside of Guild War, currently you can use it in something like the CCW raid. And then Enyo is a character that synergizes off characters that Dispel, because every time a Wind ally removes a foe's buff, she does damage. So in those sorts of teams, especially with something like Swan main hand, she can sort of go crazy too. All right, next, let's move on to Light. Light, first character is Utsusemi. Utsusemi is a budget sort of burst character. She provides echo to the team. She also has her own assassin and does a skill nuke after her normal attacks. If you're missing some of the really hard to get light burst characters, you can consider Utsusemi. Like in the current event, if you go to the grids tab, which was added recently, you can see that in some of these lower burst setups, you don't even need like Mugen and Nehan, and you can still one-turn the boss. So in setups like this, she is actually quite useful. Yeah, so something to consider if you're missing that, if you're sick and tired of seeing Mugen and Nehan and you have neither of them. All right, next, another character that was just shown, which is Lunalu. So Lunalu, I was briefly alluding to her when I was talking about Cherine, but Lunalu is currently used for her ability to copy Song S1. So in this setup right here, for example, Song uses her S1 and then Lunalu copies it with her S2. So this particular skill here copies an ally skill, and if you don't have Nehan or if you need that little bit of extra damage, she can also give herself triple strike, which is very, very nice. Okay, and then we have Yo, another sort of low button burst character. She's mainly used for her ability to start the battle with 100% charge bar, which is used in OTK or NM90. But if you want to do some low button burst with her, you can also click her S3 for a one-time assassin effect. And then finally, we have Tikoh. Tikoh is really just for having a blue pot. That's it. All right, and then let's talk about some of the other summons. Of course, the Echo summons are all universally useful in burst lineups, but also they provide a HP sub-aura for light and dark, which is not freely available because they don't have an Arcarum summon for that. So that's something to consider. I will talk about Wind slightly just because Wind has two options. Owlcat is technically better and more damage if you're doing a one-turn rotation because it provides high echoes, and Demon Brim is better if you're doing a longer rotation and you also need to cut your HP. So there is that dual option there for Wind. Next, some miscellaneous summons that are universally useful. So Shiva. Shiva, despite having a fire aura, is very strong with FLB because you can now call this on turn 1, and this is an assassin and also gives you 100% here, and it works for any element ally. So even on something like, for example, Light, you can use Shiva and you can do very short rotations with this summon. It's a very good summon. Yeah. If your grid and your characters have a lot of raw damage, you can make use of something like Shiva. So currently that's things like Light and Dirt, I believe as well, Earth. So yeah, it's a summon to consider if you are invested in those manual burst setups. Next is Alexiel. Alexiel is a summon which I feel like a lot of people really want for the context of Hexa, 40%. However, I think 40% Hexa is one of the least, like it's something maybe to consider, but like there's other ways to get by 40%. You can just call Zeus, or you can have like other summons. You can, on some elements, you can just call Bunkle and Guard as well. So there's a couple different ways to get past it. You can call Grimnir as well. But the reason I'm recommending Alexiel is mainly due to the fact that this 100% cut just comes in useful randomly at times. So for example, recently in the CCW raid, some of the skill mash setups use this to just tank an Omen, to ignore it. We've seen this sort of been used in some Far Zero teams where you just tank one of the Omens and ignore it there. You can do it in Guild War, and in Guild War it's particularly useful because you don't take debuffs unless you take damage. And since this is a 100% cut, you won't take damage. So yeah, this summon just randomly pops up from time to time and it is useful. So if you don't want that happening to you, and yeah, or if you find those sorts of things annoying, it's something you can definitely consider. All right, and then we have Grand Order. Grand Order is really only used for their sub-aura here, amplify damage for non-elemental foes. It is the only summon sub-aura that provides this sort of effect. So yeah, if you want to do like HL solos or things like that and you need more damage, then something you can consider. And then finally, Lucy Baha. I don't really recommend these just because they cost so many Sunstones and Sands to uncap, and unlike these other summons, you can always use a friend summon for these ones. But I think somewhere along your Granblue journey, you might be like, hey, I really need my own. And yeah, for that reason, I'm just putting them here because they are strong summons at the end of the day. But always remember, you can borrow somebody else's. So just think about whether you can live with borrowing someone else's or if you really need your own is all I'm saying. All right. And I think that about covers it for my Suptix recommendations. I'm not talking about the primals and the dragon summons here, just because they're good either way, right? So yeah, I don't really need to talk about them. If you need them, you know you need them. If you're a Magna player, you don't need them. So yeah, that's that. All right, and then finally, talking about the Summer Select Star Premium draw. So this is a builder scam. You'll get one of the 10 items you put in here randomly. I don't have time to talk about all of these because there's so many of them, right? But what I have done for you guys is make a little tier list of sorts. So pretty much top to bottom is how often they're used and how like irreplaceable they are to like sort of how underused or how I never see them be used. So if you have any questions or you want me to explain anything in more detail, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I think that will do it for me in this video. Hopefully my suggestions have helped here. And best of luck to your guys' free draws over the next coming days. Have a good one. I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye. Bye-bye.